Welcome to Our Curious Amalgam, the weekly podcast brought to you by the Antitrust Law section of the American Bar Association. Our Curious Amalgam explores the fascinating and increasingly overlapping world of competition, consumer protection, data protection, and privacy law. Each week, we bring you leading global experts on the most compelling issues of the day. Enjoy the show.
Hi, and welcome to Our Curious Amalgam, the podcast from the American Bar Association Antitrust Law section. My name is John Roberti, and today's topic is, what's your advice? Summarizing what we've heard from the Curious Amalgam guests. One of the things we try to do each week on Our Curious Amalgam is we ask our guests, who are typically more experienced practitioners, what advice they have for younger lawyers and how would they have done things differently. Today, we've put together what we think are sort of some of the thematic pieces of advice, and we're going to talk through these with one of our star young lawyers. My co-host today is Alicia Downey. Hi, Alicia.
Hi, John.
Alicia, what are we doing today?
Over the course of more than 100 episodes, many of Our Curious Amalgam guests were asked the same question again and again. What advice do you have for a young lawyer? And I thought it would be fun to go back and collect all that advice and present it in one show. It was really an interesting exercise. All of the advice was very sincere. Some of it was kind of unexpected. Some of it was brilliant. But all of it, I think, represented a real effort on the part of the guests to show some empathy for the position that young lawyers are in. And I think it'll be a really useful way of providing a lot of guidance to those of our listeners who are in the position of perhaps just starting out or a few years into practice, like our co-host today, Jessica Waters. Jessica is a member of our podcast committee, and I'm happy to welcome her. She's going to kind of play the role of the everyday young lawyer and help send us on this journey of hearing everybody's advice. So welcome to Jessica.
Thanks, Alicia. Thanks, John.
All right, well, let's get started.
Be proactive.
Get a perspective on the bigger picture.
Read writing books. Read good writing. Write every day.
Never stop writing articles.
Read transcripts.
Study economics.
Sharpen and keep their sense of humor.
Trust yourself.
Follow what your interests are.
And then you have to have some passion for it.
Try to follow your passion.
Keep looking for your passion.
Develop passions. Find areas that are happening that you can be part of.
So what you've just heard is an amalgam of a lot of the advice that I listened to and have collected. Some of it, isn't very specific. So Jessica, as a young lawyer yourself, what are some of the things that you and your contemporaries are interested in learning?
Thanks, Alicia. Well, to kick us off, my first question is, how important is government experience?
Well, fortunately, a lot of our guests touched on that very subject. In this next clip, you're going to hear from 3 folks who all worked in the Antitrust Division of the Department of Justice: John Jacobs, who's now a partner at Perkins Coie; Heather Nyong'o, who's in private practice now at WilmerHale; and Craig Lee, who's with Baker McKenzie. Here's what they had to say.
Spending part of your career in the government is really valuable. In and of itself, public service and representing consumers is a great thing to do with your law degree. And you get to work on some great investigations and cases. But if you want to also later move to private practice, I think it gives you tremendous insight into how the antitrust agencies work, and that can be a great help.
I think that a career in this field in particular, where you have the opportunity to go into the government, I 100% would say always take that opportunity if you have it. I think that it's critical to be able to know how the government thinks, to be able to defend your clients in the best way when you do go back out into the defense side.
I think having agency experience is critical.
you learn a lot working at the division or another agency. And I think that's very helpful in either whether you want to stay there or you want to work on the private sector. But if you don't have the opportunity, I think it's just, getting involved in as many cases as you can. Taking on any role you can in different cases, even if it's the lowest role that no one wants to do, and just kind of building up your experience, building up your expertise.
I think I appreciate Craig's comment about how to overcome the lack of government experience. I never worked for the government other than as a clerk at a state Supreme Court. But the others felt very strongly about the value that brings. What do you think about that, John?
Look, I think that's absolutely right, and I think the first point is it's also fun. I don't know that I think that's sort of underneath what the guests have been saying, but it's a great job. You get to live and breathe antitrust if that's what you really love to do, or live and breathe consumer protection. So it's a fun job, and it's a very, very valid choice, by the way, to just go and do that. I think you'll find that particularly FTC lawyers are some of the happiest government lawyers. So in a sense, if the goal in life is happiness, considering government careers is also that. If you do want to talk about moving back and forth, which is also a valid choice, it does really bring you insights and an additional, shouldn't undercount the credential. And when you're talking to a client about something that is going on, an investigation, a merger, you can say with some authority, okay, while we're talking in this room, here's what's going on in the other room. And that gives the client comfort and gives them insight. So all of those reasons, it is a really good idea. Is it essential? No, there have been plenty of very successful practitioners who never did government service. But if given the opportunity, it's something I would certainly share in advising people to do. If you have the right opportunity to do it, and it's right for your family and financially and all those things, definitely something to do.
Well, I've got to say, you've sold me. I guess I need to set my sights on government next. Another question I had, do you think I need to have a deep understanding of economics to be a good antitrust lawyer?
I think that's a great question, and one that, again, several guests touched on. You're going to hear in this next clip Corin Wong-Irvin, who's currently with Axon, Veltrup, and Harkrider. Then you'll hear from Nicholas Levy, who's with Cleary Gottlieb, Sarah Oxenham-Allen, who's working in a state AG's office and is currently the chair of the NAG Antitrust Task Force and manager in the Virginia AG's office.
Antitrust is all about economics. And so learn economics.
Learning some economics, I think, is important.
Study economics if you have a chance. That is very helpful in all antitrust cases.
Here again, I guess I'm an abject failure. I never took an antitrust course in college. The economics that I have picked up was really a case-specific and matter-specific. And every so often you do kind of have to open up a book and get yourself grounded. But I can't deny you need to understand basic economics for sure for a lot of matters. John, what's
my advice on this? So yeah, for sure. I mean, it certainly is helpful, but don't get lost in the economics either, right? The reason you study economics is which can be very complicated, is so that you can take a complicated thing and explain it in a simple way. So if you have that understanding, it helps. And certainly there are a lot of arguments that are economics based, and kind of need to understand those as well. Again, is it critical? Absolutely not. There have been plenty of very successful people who, tell you that they aren't going to do it if there's going to be math.
Well, and I should say too, I don't know any successful antitrust lawyer who's gotten to the point where they're running their own regression analyses or actually performing the work of a professional economist, and doing the econometrics. As John says, you really need to be able to translate these concepts into your advocacy and make them work for the client in a particular matter. Yeah,
and I've had the pleasure or the pain of cross-examining economic experts. And to do that, you have to have some basic understanding to know how to do that. So yeah, like I said, it's good advice. If you have a chance to do it, great. But if you haven't had a chance to do it, don't say I can't be an antitrust lawyer. There's still plenty of room for you.
I love that. So some of my contemporaries, I think, worry that as junior lawyers, we're, interchangeable and we're not seen as adding much value to the client. What can we do to stand out from the crowd?
Well, it's interesting that a lot of our guests had something to say on that point as well. In this next clip, we're going to hear from Randy Treitel, who's a section of antitrust law leader, as well as the director of the Federal Trade Commission's Office of International Affairs, Kevin Hom, who's a partner with Hunton Andrews Kurth, and Alex Simon, a partner with Pearson Simon and Warshaw. Here's what they had to say.
The first thing to do is to become an expert on U.S. antitrust law. I maintain that you can be an effective antitrust lawyer on the international scene only with if you're an American lawyer, only with a solid grounding in U.S. law off of which to base that.
When you become sort of the expert on the team on an antitrust case, you'll find yourself getting assigned to sort of meatier and more substantive assignments just sort of based on that expertise, and things sort of logically flow from that. And that's something where you're all on equal footing on every new case, whether, the most junior associate to the most senior partner, everybody's starting at square one in terms of the facts.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is try to become an expert in areas that you're familiar with. Like I mentioned, antitrust law branches to all different parts of life. So if you are an expert in a certain topic, like video games, for example, use that to your advantage.
So there we have it. Become an expert either in the law, in the facts, or in a particular industry.
I frame that, Alicia, a little bit differently. Or maybe it's the same. I tend to advise younger lawyers, make yourself indispensable in some way. And that's probably saying the same thing. But realize that if you bring a particular expertise that and can support your team in that way, and what you bring is important, that is a way to stand out. Prove you're reliable, and the work will come.
Thank you. I think that's excellent advice. What advice do you have for young lawyers who want to grow as a lawyer more broadly? I know I personally was very concerned about being pigeonholed into antitrust, and while that certainly hasn't been my experience, I'm always thinking about how I can continue to grow professionally.
Yeah, there's definitely tension between becoming an expert, getting deeper into particular areas versus preserving your options. In this next clip, we're going to hear from 4 practitioners. The first one is Lindy Bernhardt, who's with Cleary Gottlieb, Nicholas Levy again, Jamie Santos is with Goodwin, and another Boston lawyer, Lisa Wood from Foley Hoag.
I think my advice would be to always be willing to try new things. I think the best way to develop skills and to learn new things and to learn new industries is to keep working on things you've never done before and keep trying to do things you've never done before.
Reading widely, and by that I don't mean necessarily only reading legal textbooks, reading about behavioral science, reading novels that are well written, learning how to write well, developing your skill set as broadly as you can.
I would say meet as many people as you can that do interesting things and talk to them about their career. I think the most valuable insights I've gotten have not been through, listening to Supreme Court cases, which I like doing, but through going to a Supreme Court case and talking to the person in the bar line next to me about what they do and how they got to where they are.
So to the extent you have the opportunity through pro bono and in your early years as an associate to work on a lot of different matters and talk to clients in a lot of different industries, I really think it serves you well, because when you go then as a more senior lawyer to sort of figure out what the case is about, what the trial theme should be, what's going to resonate with a jury or a judge or a regulator, if you have a broader experience, you have a better shot, I think, at being effective. And I think if you specialize too early and too narrowly, you have a real shot at missing the forest for the trees.
I think all good advice. And what I hear people saying is, you have to always see the bigger picture. And just as importantly, be a sponge. There's lots and lots going on around you. Absorb all of that. Keep it in mind. Again, the more context you bring, the stronger your advocacy and your representation to your clients is going to be.
Well, I could definitely second the advice of reading well-written novels. Certainly from the perspective of writing, you're telling a story so often in your work, whether as an advocate or even analyzing a problem, that reading good storytelling is always valuable. And it's a nice way to take your mind off work for a while, at least.
Thank you. I also really liked what Jamie said about meeting people in the industry. I think it can be really intimidating, though, to reach out to partners or people that you don't know in the industry, especially as a very junior lawyer. Do you have any advice or best practices for those sorts of interactions or cold calls?
We sure do. We're going to hear in the next clip Meaghan Gerke, who's with Morrison Foerster, Alex Brown, who's with Alston and Bird. Here's what they had to say.
I always encourage younger lawyers to be proactive. And if there are things that they want to do, if they see lawyers where they're working either in a firm or government, academic setting, to be proactive and reach out to those lawyers who are doing the types of work that they want to do and ask how they can get involved.
I just reach out, reach out to the people that you think that you're interested in their work. 9 times out of 10 people will respond. Just send them an email and get connected.
Both Meaghan and Alex, what they're really saying is just go ahead and take the initiative. Really, I don't know a single excellent lawyer who would, rudely shove aside a young lawyer's sincere attempt to find out more about what they do. Yeah, you might get ignored if somebody's having a wild day. But ultimately, people, even senior lawyers, like the connection with young lawyers. So just, buck up your courage and send a short email and see what happens.
Look, at a higher level, my life experience has been if you do things that are uncomfortable, sometimes you really learn from them and you can gain comfort from that. So for me, it's very hard to do a pure cold call to somebody, but doing that, while maybe uncomfortable, you overcome it. And Alicia's point is absolutely right. If you're reaching out to somebody, play to their ego. We are absolutely egotistical creatures in this, among the legal profession. So if you tell somebody how brilliant they are and that you just want to learn from them, or if you frame something as "I'd like your advice," that plays to people's ego, and I think they're probably be a little bit more likely to speak to you. Everybody loves talking about themselves.
Yeah. And think of it from the other side too. I really can't sit in my office trying to find a young lawyer to call up and provide advice to unsolicited. If you want it, you gotta make that call.
I hadn't thought about it that way, Alicia, but that's a really good point. So I guess the advice here is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? I've noticed that a lot of antitrust lawyers all seem to know each other, which is obviously really helpful when you're working on matters across firms. And I assume that a lot of that comes from years of experience. But do you have any tips on ways to meet other antitrust lawyers or get more involved in the antitrust community?
Well, several of our guests had a lot to say about that topic. You're going to hear from former section chair Eileen Gotts, a partner with Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen & Katz, John Jacobs again, David Evans, who's with Kelly Dry and Warren, and again, Corin Wong Irvin, who we heard from earlier. Here's what they had to say about getting to know the community.
Get involved in the ABA, antitrust section. My best friends in the world are there. You will find it's a very generous bar. No matter how old, how young, everyone helps everyone. It's wonderful.
Join the ABA antitrust section. We've got some great materials to help you build your expertise and your practice.
Join the section.
Yes.
Become a young lawyer division rep. No, seriously, I think that's a great idea because you get to meet the people who truly love antitrust, and they will give you opportunities to learn more within the section. And that will enhance your professional career. We're a small bar, and our section represents a large portion of it. And you're going to be bumping up against these folks in deals and litigation for years. And seeing them in the context, in the social context of the section is fun. It's fun for one thing. You become friends with folks, and it really, I think, enhances your professional career and your professional enjoyment out of things.
The ABA. I mean, most of my best friends I met at ABA events. gone to Brazil with them or on family vacations. So it's very important to me on a personal level, but it also has been a wonderful opportunity to meet mentors and at some point in my career start to have mentees. And I, for like a decade didn't apply for a job because people really got to know my work in ABA because we do a lot of writing and people see how you work as a team member. It's a lot of consensus building. I got offered jobs sort of one after the other. I would say, wow, if you ever have an opening, I'd love to work for you. And then I would go work for them. It was wonderful.
So there you have it. Join the antitrust law section of the ABA.
We will now receive our budget for 2021 as a result of having done that. I think that's right. And I think you have to listen to what the guests are saying a little bit more carefully. Joining the ABA doesn't mean just sending in a check, checking the box and then passively watching your emails. I think really what people were saying, if you listen harder, is take the opportunity, join, and then take the opportunity the section offers to get involved in things. Write, offer to speak on programs, show up at conferences. You can join, but to get the value of what you're joining, you really would need to participate.
Well, I know I'm looking forward to the ABA's in-person social events, hopefully sometime soon. Okay, so what advice would you give to junior associates who are just starting out at their respective firms? I think especially for folks who maybe started remotely during the pandemic and haven't really had the opportunity to build relationships with their more senior colleagues, it can be really daunting to speak up and make your voice heard on a matter.
Yeah, there's no doubt that there's a whole generation of young lawyers who've faced really an unprecedented challenge. Here's what a few lawyers had to say about that. You'll be hearing in this order from Jack Martin, who's with Hunt and Andrews Kurth, Arlene Barukowitz, who herself is a young lawyer from Porter Wright, Morris and Arthur, and Lisa Phelan with Morrison Forster.
Sometimes the answer to the problem is just a very simple hit the books and do the research answer. And I think a lot of time the people best at that are the ones straight out of law school. And so I would say to the younger lawyers, trust yourself, do the analysis, figure out what you think the answer is, and don't sell yourself short just because you may lack experience and may lack a number of years.
As with everything in the law, I think you have to have confidence when you get to do anything important in a trial. You have to have confidence.
You have to have diligence in the antitrust and cartel space because these cases sometimes are very hard to break or very hard to build, very hard to get your arms around, and you can get discouraged easily. And so you have to have the patience to hang in there and the resilience to bounce back if you get, some bad developments. And then you have to have some passion for it. As I said, it's sort of the fact that these are big, exciting, economy impacting cases gave me the passion. And if people can find that, that's the secret to life for me.
So I think it's an interesting mixture of confidence, resilience, diligence, and passion.
And I think the warning is you're probably going to fall down a bunch of times, and that's okay. I guess that's a resilience point. What we do is not easy. Take some chances. If it doesn't work out, brush yourself off, get back up, and go back in.
I think that's fantastic advice. Thinking back to when I was in law school, I remember agonizing over what practice area I wanted to go into. And I think a lot of law students share that experience. How did you figure out what practice you wanted to pursue?
Well, I think as you'll hear from this next group of speakers, I think it's a combination of self-direction and perhaps just serendipity. So we're going to hear from Kelly Smith-Fain, who's with Latham & Watkins, Jean Maldoff with Covington & Burling, and Leslie Fair at the Federal Trade Commission.
When I look at people kind of coming out of law school now, they're very concerned about failing or trying something and not liking it. And I think it's just really important to be attuned to what's fun and what's interesting. And that's kind of how I found my way into antitrust law. I just started following what was fun and what were the questions I wanted to answer. And I think, if that leads you to antitrust, that's wonderful. And obviously, I think that's the best place to be.
The law can seem like this sort of big, overwhelming profession, but actually you learn as you get into it that it's a number of smaller, more cohesive communities. And if you're willing to kind of follow an interest down a rabbit hole, you can find your community, which I find to be really helpful and makes working more fun too.
The first thing is just to have your ear to the ground on popular culture. That, to me, is not a hard thing. That's a beauty of the job. The second is to take advantage in law school and early in somebody's career to network, to get to know people, to find out what the area is about, and most importantly, not to stop until they find something that they absolutely love. That's what happened to me 3 decades ago when I came to the FTC.
So I hope that was somewhat inspirational as well as perhaps reassuring. You don't have to have everything decided the day you graduate from law school. Some flexibility, open-mindedness, and curiosity can sometimes land you in exactly the right place where you were meant to be.
What I often tell people is think about your career, at least the beginning, in 3-year chunks. Spend the first 3 years learning, gaining as much knowledge as you can, and trying to set yourself up so that you'll have the most options. And once you get to that second 3 years, make sure you continue to have opportunities to grow. At some point, you want to declare a major, and that's probably a smart thing to do. But declaring a major doesn't necessarily, it can mean a lot of different things. It's just that at some point you will want to specialize is probably not exactly the right word. Because specializing might be, I'm going to be a trial lawyer, or specializing might be, I'm going to be the company lawyer, and I'm going to know everything about the company. So there's just a lot of different options, and thinking about it and sort of reflecting on it. Again, 3-year chunks is what's worked for me.
I love the point about 3-year chunks. And I really love the idea of following your passion. I mean, that's how I wound up in antitrust. I fell in love with it and thought it was so interesting and have been so fulfilled by my career thus far. So I'm really looking forward to what's down the line. And well, thinking about what's down the line, there are obviously a lot of factors beyond being a good antitrust lawyer that goes into developing a well-rounded and successful practice. Are there things I should be thinking about even now if I want to continue to grow in the antitrust space or maybe one day make partner?
Absolutely. Just picking up on Leslie Fair's comment about networking, a couple of our guests had some interesting things to say about that. The first one you'll hear from is Matt Sawchak, who's with Robinson, Bradshaw, and Hinson, and Noah Phillips, who's currently a commissioner of the Federal Trade Commission.
Keep in touch with people from your law school class. Consider every lawyer you work with, whether on the side of the V or across the V. Consider that person a potential friend and a potential referrer and a person you can, offer help to and value to. That, all of those little deposits of good conduct and help and just living the right way, all those things add up, and the day will come when they'll kind of reach critical mass and your phone will ring. But like every other kind of a savings program, you got to start early. Get that compounding process going from the very beginning. And where that really starts is just being conscious of it.
Hustling can be really hard if you're introverted, if you are humble. There are a lot of reasons why it's often hard, not just to ask for things that you want, but to ask people you don't even know for things that you want, people for favors who don't owe you a thing. That isn't taught in a lot of law schools, right? That's not taught on the bar. It's probably actually terrifically helpful if you want to build a practice, you want to go out there and pitch business. But that often is something that the partners are doing, and you don't get to that until later, if you're at a private firm. The thing I tell the law student or the young lawyer who wants to kind of make a jump into something very different where there's a lot of uncertainty, in addition to kind of making them aware of the risks, and usually you'll make less money and this sort of thing, is just that work on those skills.
A little bit of hustle, a little bit of networking. Those are the things to keep in mind.
Yeah, I agree. It takes a mix of things to make it work.
But I could also relate though to Commissioner Phillips' comment about the challenge to an introverted person. You really just have to force yourself to do it. It's part of having a career. And, going back to our comment about the advice to be proactive and take initiative, most people appreciate it when somebody else breaks the ice.
I know I definitely do. I can be a bit introverted as well, but that is really fantastic advice. I think that's all the questions I have. But Alicia, John, do you have any other advice for young lawyers?
I think the most important advice I would give people is make happiness the goal. And ultimately, as you make your choices about career and how to advance in career, think about it in terms of how it relates to your overall happiness. The two, and I have to tell you, the two are related. Okay. But the things that you do in your career and having the best career ever is probably not going to be worth it if you do it at the cost of if you're miserable every day doing it. Make choices that are your own and be okay with making some of the unconventional ones if it's going to lead you to a place where you're going to be happy going to work every day.
And my advice is don't compare yourself to others. Don't look at somebody else's resume and think that you're a failure. Don't look at your own resume and think you're all that, because there is always somebody smarter. Some days you will win all the cookies. Other days you will lose all the cookies, no matter how hard you try. So take the long view. Don't take yourself too seriously.
I guess my other piece of advice is listen to the Our Curious Amalgam podcast every week.
Thank you both. This was really helpful. And thank you to everyone else who spoke and gave such wonderful advice.
All right. We will see you next time on Our Curious Amalgam.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Our Curious Amalgam, a competition, consumer protection, data protection, and privacy law podcast. It is produced and shared around the globe by ABA's Antitrust Law Section. The opinions expressed by the participants in this podcast are their own and do not necessarily represent their employer or other organizations. If you like what you heard or would like to become a member of the American Bar Association, please check out what the Antitrust section has to offer at ambar.org/antitrust. You can learn more about our podcast at ourcuriousamalgam.com. If you have comments, suggestions, or podcast ideas, please reach out to us at podcast@ourcuriousamalgam.com. Until next time, thank you for listening.